Hey guys, I'm Papa Pete and welcome to the 125. The 125 is a YouTube show that's dedicated to the 125 original games released for the Intellivision System between 1979 and 1989. Now, the 125 is a bit of a different type of show because each episode actually consists of more than one video. First of all, you'll have the review video, the one where we talk about the history of a game and other things about the game, which is the one you're watching right now. Plus, we're going to have an actual gameplay video that just shows the gameplay so you can get a good look at a game from start to finish without commentary. Anyway guys, today's game is going to be the first game from Coleco I've done, the arcade hit Venture. Here we go. The arcade hit Venture by Exidy was released for the Intellivision by Coleco in 1983, after it was already released as a launch title for the Colecovision system a year earlier. While the Colecovision version of Venture was basically very well received and generally considered to be an exceptionally faithful rendition of the game, like most of the games released by Coleco for the Intellivision version just wasn't as good. And frankly, maybe that was on purpose. Now, Venture is a dungeon exploring game where the player controls Winky, a bow and arrow wielding protagonist who searches for treasure and goes through various monster-infested rooms trying to gather it as he proceeds through different levels of increasing difficulty. Winky starts each level with an overhead view outside in the hallway surrounding the rooms, where he has to make his way to the rooms while avoiding the indestructible hall monsters. When you enter each room, typically you'll see 3 monsters guarding a treasure at the far end, and armed with your bow and arrow, your job is to get rid of the monsters and get the treasure, and then get back out of the room into the hallway as quickly as possible. Like I said before, Winky's armed with a bow and arrow so you can kill the monsters from a distance, but if any monster touches you, or if you even touch one of the dead monsters as it decays away, you lose your life, you lose a Winky, and you have to start again with your next character outside in the hallway. When you run out of Winkies, like most arcade games, the game is over. Now, it's not necessary to kill all 3 monsters before you grab the treasure and run out, but frankly, it's usually easier to do so. That being said, if you can manage to, hey Treek, how you doing? If you manage to grab the treasure and get out while avoiding all the monsters or one of the monsters, that's within your power to do so. But remember, if you take too long, one of the hall monsters, and they're indestructible, remember, will come into the room and chase you out. If they touch you, you're dead. It reminds me a lot of Berserk when Evil Otto comes in the room. It's almost the exact same thing. There are also a few rooms that are quite a bit different. Like, for example, in the first level, there's the wall room, where there are no monsters, but when you get in, there's some moving walls, and you have to avoid the moving walls, work your way in around, and grab the treasure and get out before the hall monster comes in and gets you. There's also some rooms where you have to go in, and there's no monsters at all until you touch the treasure. And once you do that, the 3 monsters appear. So what that means is you actually have to fight your way out of the room instead of fighting your way in. In all cases, once you've exited a room and collected the treasure, on the overhead hallway view, the room will blank out and you can no longer enter that room. Once you've completed all 4 rooms in any given level, you've completed the level and you move on to the next one. All in all, in the Intellivision version, there's 3 different levels, which means there's 12 distinctly different rooms that you have to conquer. If you get past this, the 3rd level, they just regurgitate, they come back around, and you do the same levels again with increasing difficulty. Scoring in Venture is pretty basic, where each treasure is worth 200 points, and the monsters are worth 100 points. At least this is the way it starts. And then as the difficulty increases, the values increase as well. Also, when you finish each level, you get a time bonus at the end that depends on how quickly you can finish that level. So the quicker you can finish it, obviously, the more points you get. Now, obviously, you can't talk about the score without talking about what I would call the treasure screen. And the treasure screen is a grid that shows a bunch of question marks. Actually, it'll show enough for 9 different levels. And what you can do is, as you collect the treasure, it fills in on that screen works its way around, and it's shown every time before you start a new level. It's kind of a neat little touch that's been in every version of Venture right since the beginning. Also on this treasure screen, one thing that you can always see the score right at the very top of the screen, plus the player number, number 1 or number 2. But the things that you can only see in this treasure screen is the number of Winkies that you have, and they're depicted by the number of little arrows that you see up at the top. You start off the game with 5, and you can collect 1 after 20,000 points, 1 extra one. Now, the manual actually says you'll collect another Winky in multiples of 20,000. But I don't find that to be true. I found that I only got 1 after I completed the first 20,000 points. The controls of Venture are stupid simple. Basically all you do is you use the disc to move around, and you use the side buttons to shoot your arrows. Now, you don't even have overlays for this game. That being said, Psycho Stormtrooper did make some basic overlays for collectors to have, and if you want to see versions of those, you can check them out on places. Do a search online, but you can look at them on INTV Funhouse. I'll put a link to that website in the comments section below. Really kind of neat to look at. I'm not even sure if you can still get them or not, but they did exist, and you can do printouts or whatever you would like to do. I do want to point out that the movement and the shooting in the Intellivision version of Venture is very, very smooth. It's very easy to do, easy to move around, but the only thing might be that it's a bit too quick. It really does move fast, so it's easy to run into things by accident. But with a little bit of practice, you could really master that, and at the end of the day, they did a very good job with the movement and the control of Winky in Venture for the Intellivision. The graphics of the Intellivision version of Venture are decent. Winky, of course, is pretty simple to depict, really. He's just a circle with a smiley face on it. But in the Intellivision version, you can't see his bow. You can see the arrow points out, so that's basically the direction you're shooting or you're aiming. But you can't see the bow, so it's a little bit different. Also, things like the monsters, the hall monsters, and even the treasures, they're all much less detailed than the other versions, such as the Coleco version or the arcade version of the game. Also, as far as the treasure screen goes, in the Intellivision version, the treasure screen shows all the treasures the same color. It's really pretty bland. There's a lot of color in the different treasures on the screen in the other systems, so the Intellivision version really comes up short. Overall, I'd just say that Venture for Intellivision has moderate, mediocre graphics. The sounds in Venture are pretty typical. It has a regular swoosh when you shoot your arrow, and it makes a buzzing noise when you get killed or hit by a monster, so you know what happened, and the lights and things flash. But the real strength of the sound in Venture is the music. It makes really good use of the music, playing different tunes when you're in the hallway, as well as in a lot of the different rooms all have different music when you go in. And it's not as crisp or as clear as the music in the Colecovision or arcade ports, but then again, it's still quite well done. It's too bad that it's not quite as good, but it's still pretty good. The game variations are also very simple in Venture. Simply put, you can play 1 or 2 players. If you play 2 players, you alternate. You lose a man, the other guy goes till he loses a man. But there's also 4 different skill levels that you can choose from. It just starts the game off at a higher difficulty, and what that can do is it really can extend the longevity of the game a little bit, making it better for players who are better at it to have a little bit of challenge. So, are the variations great? No, nothing special. Very basic, but adequate. You know, I never had Venture when I was a kid for the Intellivision, but back in those days, my oldest sister, who lives in Bangor, Maine, they did have a Colecovision for their kids, and they had all the typical arcade ports of the day, so I played Venture lots on the Colecovision. Now, I look back at it now, I've gotten Venture for my collection on the Atari 2600, the Intellivision, of course I have the Colecovision version, and you know, I really, if I had a choice, the Colecovision port is the one that I would still choose to play if I was going to sit down and play Venture today. Because basically, the Intellivision port just isn't as strong. And I can't put that note out there with without making the biggest point of all, I alluded to it earlier, that there's a lot of people who believe that Coleco intentionally made their arcade ports that they created for Intellivision far inferior to their own Colecovision ports, so they could show off their system and sell more consoles and more arcade games than their rival Intellivision. There's no actual proof to see if that's true or not, but that's been a rumor that's existed for a long time. It's never been thoroughly proven, but it has never been disproven either. You know, this difference in quality in Colecovision ports versus Intellivision ports, it's very consistent. The Intellivision port was always significantly, really, a lot of them were bad. And frankly, homebrew artists have taken the games and made great ports of these same arcade games for the Intellivision later on. So, is that rumor true? I don't know, but it's consistent right across all their games, suspiciously so. Another interesting fact about the Coleco ports for Intellivision is Intellivision used the exec file to put a little thing in there that dealt with the menu screen that kept these games from running. So you'll notice on Venture, there's Venture, Donkey Kong, Carnival. They will not work on the Intellivision 2. There have been workarounds and different versions will work, but the majority of them at the beginning did not work. And yeah, Coleco might have been playing some games, but Intellivision was playing their own games back in the day, making sure the competition cartridges didn't work at all on their system. Anyhow, to sum up, taking into consideration the generally mediocre graphics, the decent sound, as well as the uninspired gameplay and typically a very inferior port of an arcade classic, I'm going to give Venture by Coleco for the Intellivision a 4 out of 10 rating. Well guys, that's it for today's episode of the 125, my first look at one of the Coleco arcade ports for the Intellivision. Man, they're almost infamous. There's so many battles between Coleco and Intellivision back in the day. It was hard to believe they've released these games for the Intellivision system. Anyway guys, if you have any comments, make sure you leave them below and hit the like button and be sure to subscribe to the channel because we'll see you next time on the 125. Take care.
Papa Pete, the old ass gamer. Papa Pete, the old ass gamer. If you haven't grown up by the age of 50, you don't have to.
Hey, it's Paul Nerman or Nermix from the Intellivisionaries podcast. I'm also part of the Amico development team. And you're watching Papa Pete, the old guy gamer.
What the hell?